One of the joys of having a young child is that you get to hear and rehear our traditions for the very first time. Sylvia knows this song. So Sella came home from the ECC here at Holy Blossom last year singing, "I want to be a Maccabee, big and brave and boys." And despite my best attempt to convince her, no, the last word is bold, she insisted, "No, Abba, it's boys." The Maccabees were boys, weren't they? And this little pseudo-question, 100% confident statement stopped me right in my tracks. I suppose, yes, my dear sweet girl, you're right. They were big and brave and boys. I never really thought of it that way. And this year, Sella has a brand new phrase for me. It's, "Abba, tell the truth." And sometimes she says this to me just as we're going over our daily plan. First, we're going to do X, then Y, then Z. And she goes, "Abba, tell the truth." And I'm like, "Yes, sweetheart, that is the plan. It will be the truth as long as we get it done." But a week ago, when we were downstairs playing dreidel at our Sunday morning Hanukkah party here at Holy Blossom, I said, "Sella, honey, do you know what the letters on the dreidel mean?" And she said, "Yes, Nes Gadol Haya Sham." And then she turned to me and she said, "Abba, is that true?" And that's when I realized I know absolutely nothing about the dreidel. And so I set out to fix that. But what I found may shock you. And therefore, this morning, in the spirit of the holiday, in the spirit of the question my child cannot stop asking me, the true history of the dreidel. I, like many of you, was raised on the following story, that in the days of the Maccabean revolt, when Torah study was outlawed, the elders of Israel would place children outside of caves and study halls and homes, and they would tell them, "Play this simple game. Spin this top," they said, "and one of the letters will be a code word. If the Greeks are coming to arrest us for studying Torah, you shout out the coded letter, and we will have time to hide all of our texts and our scrolls and our artifacts." And it was because of this unassuming little top, this dreidel, that the study of Torah survived. Quick poll, who here has heard that story or something like it in the past? Okay. Here's a different variety. Maybe you've heard this one. That during the days of Antiochus, when Torah study was outlawed, the elders of Israel instead doubled down on the oral study of Torah, that which is recited and repeated to each other, the Mishnaic code known as Torah Shebaal Peh, and that the clever Jews would gather in groups with small bags of gelt and a gambling top between them, and all of it was just a ruse. Because if the Greeks came, they wouldn't find the elders of Israel studying the Holy Torah. They would find a bunch of immoral gamblers. Had anyone heard this one? Around the same number of people. Okay, I'm honestly a little surprised. But, both stories sound very authentic. They both ring with a kind of cadence and the storytelling that Talmudic sages are known for. It's the perfect sort of thing to find in rabbinic literature or an apocryphal book like Maccabees. And so I went looking. And not only did I quickly find that this story was missing, but all of the versions of the stories like this one, where our ancestors make great sacrifices to keep the story and the study and the power of Torah alive, there was no dreidel in any of them. In fact, the dreidel itself could not be found anywhere. Not in any rabbinic text from the rabbinic era, so I decided to zoom forward in time, and I went to the Middle Ages, and I couldn't find the dreidel there either. The first text from a rabbi I could find that mentioned the dreidel was in the 1800s, a Hasidic text called the Sichot Haran, the Rabbi Nachman of Breslov text. And he does not bother explaining what a dreidel is. He doesn't take credit for it. He speaks of it so comfortably and so confidently that you can tell that everyone in his community, all of his students, all the rabbis, they know what a dreidel is, the same way that all of you know what a dreidel is. So we have this window we have this several hundred-year window now where we can try to figure out when did the dreidel come to the Jewish world, because we can identify a time before the dreidel, so sometime in the late Middle Ages. No one knows what a dreidel is, around 1400, and then it's a commonplace thing that everyone knows what it is by the mid-1800s. So here's our question. How and when did the dreidel come to be? And as I mentioned to you, researching the dreidel inside of Jewish texts became challenging, so I turned to academic resources. And at the digital archives of the Library of Congress, I found this, that during the 18th century, the 1700s, in England, an ancient Roman gambling top called a teetotum became a popular and widespread object of affection among traders and travelers and peddlers. And teetotum could have any number of sides, 4 or 6 or 8 or even 12. In each one was marked with a different Latin number or a symbol representing the rules of the game: to wager, to win, to lose, or more. So for instance, T was totum, take all. A was ofer, take from the pot. And then there might be an A2 if you had to take 2 from the pot. Or nichel, for nothing, or dipon, put into the pot, as well as put more into the pot. Lots of different varieties. But by the Georgian era in England, what had become very popular was a 4-sided variety of teetotum. According to English antiquarian Joseph Stutt, he lived at the end of the 1700s, he says, quote, "When I was a boy, the teetotum had only 4 sides. Each was marked with a letter, T for take all, H for take half, N for nothing, and P for put down or put in a stake equal to what you put in at the start." And that, I can tell, sounds quite familiar to all of you. A 4-sided top with 4 distinct rules and 4 distinct letters, half, all, nothing, put 1 in, identical to the rules of the dreidel, and right in the middle of that little historical window. And you want to know who agrees? The National Library of Israel. It theorizes that when the teetotum spread to Germany, the letters were changed from the original Latin/English, T, take all, N, nothing, F, P, into G, H, N, and S. G for ganz, all, H for hab, half, N for nicht, nothing, and S for schicht, put. And those words were then translated to Yiddish. And the language moved from the English Roman alphabet to the Hebrew alphabet as that tiny little top made its way through Europe and into the shtetl, marking the top with Gimel for ganz, Hey for hab, Nun for nit, and Shin for shtel. American folklorist Stephen Winnick writes that it's actually Judaism's incredible literary tradition and our method and love for preserving our history and our sacred object, our belief in education, that makes it so, ironically, the academic theory on the nature of the dreidel, that it's an import from Christian Europe, makes it more likely than the rabbinic folk wisdom, which says that it was a relic of the Maccabees. And he says, quote, "It's very unlikely that a game that relies on a very durable physical object, an object with specific Hebrew letters on it, could have been so popular for 2,000 years and not a single one survived, because the oldest dreidel that we have found with Hebrew letters on it dates to the 19th century. He writes, it's even more unlikely that such a conspicuous custom could have been maintained that long for such a time by such a literate community, and no one ever wrote a word about it. But then, of course, the real kicker comes with the widespread use of the word dreidel itself. Winnick points out that the Hebrew word for dreidel, sivivon, was coined in the 19th century by the very first, quote-unquote, native Hebrew speaker, Itamar ben Avi, who was the son of Eliezer ben Yehuda, who was the man that restarted the Hebrew language and taught his son only in Hebrew. And it was his son who pointed to the dreidel and called it sivivon. If there was a Semitic word for dreidel, it would have been used before then. If the dreidel had been brought from Jews from Judea into diaspora, it would have a Hebrew or an Aramaic word, not a Yiddish name. And so what gives birth to the word dreidel? It is likely a Yiddishization of two German words, a dren, which is to turn, and a trendel, which is a top. What's that little turning top called? It's a drentendel. It's a dreidel. And how did the dreidel then become synonymous with Hanukkah? Well, once again, the Library of Israel comes forward with a theory saying that Christmas was a very dangerous time for the Jews of Germany. Jewish communities would not venture out of their homes, not even to go to synagogue on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, out of fear of being attacked on the street. And when you combine this with a famous German Bubamisa that prohibits the study of Torah on Christmas Eve, well, a bit of light gambling is the best way to fill the time. And the game of dreidel therefore became a way to keep your children entertained and fill the nights when you had to be especially vigilant and locked inside. Eventually, the overlapping observance in Europe of Christmas and Hanukkah, combined with that new popularity of a brand new acronym that fits the dreidel so perfectly, Nes Gadol Haya Sham, which describes the holiday and goes on to that already existing Nun and Gimel and Hey and Shin on the dreidel, it gave birth to a brand new Hanukkah tradition that people said was 2,000 years old. Researching the dreidel, I did find a wealth of some modern glosses on its meaning from rabbinic sources from around the world. So here are 3 little dreidel facts. Number 1, Rav Tzvi Elimelech says that the 4 sides of the dreidel represent the 4 great oppressive nations of the Tanakh. Nun for Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon, Hey for Haman and Persia, Gimel for Gog and the Greeks, and Shin for Seir and Rome. And by spinning the dreidel, you topple them all. As it says in Al Hanisim, and the weak toppled the strong. Number 2, the gematria of Nes Gadol Hayasham is 358. Other ideas and teachings that the Gematria masters say match 358 include Moshiach, Nachash, the serpent from the Garden of Eden, and somehow even Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimloch Leolam Va'ed. God reigned, reigns, and will reign forever. Spinning a dreidel is therefore, according to those of you who like Gematria, an act of faith, of messianic redemption, and toppling evil. And finally, the song, I Had a Little Dreidel, was written in 1927 by Samuel Goldfarb, a Tin Pan Alley composer who translated it into Yiddish with the help of a man named Michael Gelbert. And the only difference between the songs in Yiddish and English is that in English, the dreidel is made out of, perfect, and in Yiddish, it is made out of lead. Oh, I don't know why. The song languished in obscurity until the 1950s when it was published by the conservative movement in their new annual book of holiday songs. And from there, it became an iconic mainstay of Hanukkah ever since. So as we continue our holiday of Hanukkah and enter into our 4th night, we are halfway through as of this evening, I hope that our exploration of the history of the dreidel was illuminating. I hope it was enlightening. And I hope that learning about pieces of our history that change and modify and empower our tradition, I hope that for you, like for me, it's an exciting thing. Discovering that the dreidel is relatively new does not diminish the beauty of it for me or the power of our teachings about it, even if it's an anachronism to say that it existed in ancient days, because I know that the teaching is never actually about the top. It's about the timeless themes that it represents. Knowing more of our history amplifies the ancient ties and customs and rituals that we have preserved, and it also gives meaning to our modern interpretations that we craft to make ourselves relevant and to keep ourselves of the world. So the next time I spin dreidel with my little girl, and I teach her the story about where it comes from, the same story that I was told as a child about those brave little children standing up to a world that would like to see Judaism muted and shuddered and ashamed of who it is and what we are and where we come from. I know that she may well ask me, Abba, is that true? And I will say, yes, I know it is, because it is true. It is true with every beat of my heart. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Urim Sameach. Happy Hanukkah.